8 gigs of VRAM apparently isn't enough for a high-end gaming experience in future. At least that's what channels like Hardware Unboxed have been showing in their videos. But the problem is, to get a current-gen gaming laptop with 12 gigs of VRAM, you're looking at NVIDIA RTX 4080 graphics, which start from $2,000 US. Not cheap. Well, what if I told you that this gaming laptop has 12 gigs of VRAM, but costs almost half that price? And what if I told you how you could save money on your next gaming laptop? With this message from our sponsor. Newegg's biggest summer sale is running right now. Their laptop finder tool helps you to easily find a laptop based on your custom requirements. Just put in your budget and go. Right now, they've got RTX 4050 gaming laptops starting from $699 and RTX 4060 options from $899. The lowest I've ever seen these GPUs. Whether you're after a new laptop or the latest PC hardware, Newegg's FantasTech sale has got you covered. Check it out with the sponsored link below. This is the Asus ROG Strix G15 Advantage Edition, and it has AMD's Radeon RX 6800M graphics with 12 gigs of VRAM. I originally reviewed this laptop a little over 2 years ago now, but all this time later, it still frequently goes on sale for $1,100, which is almost half the price of an RTX 4080 gaming laptop, and it has the same amount of VRAM. Even the higher tier RX 6850M XT has gone on sale for just $1,200. It just seems like with AMD, you get more VRAM for your dollar. But how well does the 6800M actually perform in games, and is it still worth buying? We've tested it in 24 games at 4K, 1440p, and 1080p resolutions, and compared it against a number of other modern laptops to find out. I want to start out with Far Cry 6, as it uses a lot of VRAM with HD textures enabled. That's why the RTX 3050 laptop with only 4 gigs of VRAM is providing unplayable frame rates. At 1080p, the RTX 3070 Ti, which can be bought for a similar price, was reaching 17% higher FPS, while the newer RTX 4070 was 38% higher. At 1440p, the 3070 Ti was now 13% faster than the 6800M, while the 4070 was 17% faster. The gaps aren't as big as what we saw at 1080p, as higher resolutions prefer more VRAM, but these are also newer GPUs, so we expect them to perform better. But then at 4K, 8 gigs of VRAM just doesn't cut it anymore, and the 6800M was now 118% faster than the newer and more expensive RTX 4070. To be fair, 44 FPS isn't amazing with the 6800M, but we could of course use FSR to boost the frame rate. The point is, the 4070, which was better at 1080p and 1440p, starts to fall apart once it runs out of VRAM, at least in this game. Although this demonstrates the point that more VRAM is better, I don't really consider the 6800M or RTX 4070 laptop GPUs to be 4K gaming options. Even if the 6800M has more VRAM, if it doesn't have enough GPU horsepower, then it's not going to give you good FPS in games at 4K anyway. Let's check some more games, because different games behave differently. Red Dead Redemption 2 is a game that tends to favor AMD's Radeon graphics over NVIDIA's GeForce, which is why the RTX 4070 was just 3% faster at 1080p. 1440p is much the same. The RTX 4070 and RTX 3070 Ti were giving the same result as the 6800M, and then the 6800M ends up slightly ahead of the 4070 at 4K. It's not much, but it's still a win from an older and cheaper GPU. The Witcher 3 was tested with ray tracing enabled, as I figured that'd help fill up the VRAM, but at 1080p, the 6800M was performing terribly. Even the cheaper and older RTX 3060 was a little better, indicating an NVIDIA advantage in RT performance at this resolution, despite the 6800M having double its VRAM capacity. At 1440p, there's basically no difference between a number of the GPUs, and that only gets worse at 4K. It doesn't seem like VRAM is the limit here. The 6800M wasn't much ahead of the older and cheaper RTX 3060 in Cyberpunk 2077 at 1080p either. Even the 8GB RTX 4060 was slightly better, and that costs about the same as the 6800M, while the more powerful and more expensive 4070 was reaching a 45% higher average FPS. The gap lowers at 1440p as more VRAM is required, with the 4070 now 16% faster than the 6800M. There wasn't much difference at 4K. The FPS from both isn't really playable at ultra settings, but again, features like FSR could be used to improve that. Forza Horizon 5 can fill up the VRAM buffer with its highest extreme preset, and at 1080p, the RTX 4070 was 11% faster. Note that the 4070 was ahead of the 3080 Ti. The 4070 had an even larger 17% lead over the 6800M at 1440p. Although the 4070 was still ahead of the 6800M at 4K, the margin is smaller at just 5%, or like 2 FPS. The 3080 Ti was further ahead in average FPS with its 16 gigs of VRAM, but for some reason, 1% lows suffered with the specific laptop I was testing with, Lenovo's Legion 7i. Watch Dogs Legion also needs a fair bit of VRAM at ultra settings. The 4070 was 7% ahead of the 6800M at both 1080p and 1440p resolutions, but then at 4K, they're basically both the same. It appears the 6800M's extra VRAM has helped to close the gap with the 4070, though it's worth noting that this game has DLSS support and not FSR, so we could improve the experience on the 4070, but not the 6800M. Alright, instead of going through more individual games, let's check out the average differences. This graph shows the average FPS from all 24 games that were tested on these GPUs. The 8GB RTX 4060 was slightly ahead of the RX 6800M at 1080p, and that can often be found for about the same price with the right sale. The 8GB 4060 was still a little ahead at the higher 1440p resolution as well, where games should start requiring more VRAM. So it would seem that in the majority of games I've tested, 8GB of VRAM is enough at max settings. At 4K, the 8GB 4070 was ahead of the 6800M. We saw in some specific games that the 6800M was able to beat the 4070 due to the VRAM capacity difference, but that was not the case on average in a wider selection of games. So is the RX 6800M still a capable laptop GPU? Yeah, definitely, especially at 1080p and 1440p resolutions. From my testing, in most cases, it wasn't obviously taking full advantage of all of its VRAM until we get to 4K though. By that point in most games, the frame rates weren't really good enough to play smoothly anyway, but that's more due to the GPU not being powerful enough than it not having enough VRAM. Laptop GPUs just aren't as powerful compared to their desktop counterparts. So look, I agree with Hardware Unboxed. 8GB of VRAM is not enough for high-end gaming. But that's the thing, in most cases, most laptops aren't capable of what I'd classify as high-end gaming anyway, which is 4K at higher setting levels. And with laptops, that's just not because of a lack of VRAM. Unless we're talking about 4080 or 4090 laptops, which are actually powerful enough for 4K gaming with high settings. But those also have more VRAM too. There are also downsides with the 6800M. As it's an AMD Radeon GPU, you can't use DLSS, as that only works with NVIDIA RTX GPUs. You can, however, still use FSR, which is quite good and available in a lot of games these days. Tim from Hardware Unboxed has shown that DLSS is superior compared to FSR, but FSR is still a good way to boost FPS in a lot of games. Unlike a newer RTX 40 series laptop, this also means that you won't get frame generation support with the 6800M. Though to be fair, it is still early days, and that feature isn't available in a whole lot of games just yet. But that said, in supported games, I have personally found it to be more beneficial to use it than not use it, as it just makes the gameplay smoother. I think it's a nice feature to have. If you're looking to buy today, honestly, for similar money to the 6800M, you could get the RTX 4060, which generally performed a bit better at 1080p and 1440p resolutions on average. Yeah, it has 8GB of VRAM, which may be more of a problem in future games than it is today. But like I've said, I think there's more to the story than just VRAM. You still need the GPU itself to have enough power to run modern games. Doubling the budget to get an RTX 4080 laptop with 12 gigs of VRAM is not going to be an option for most people that are looking to spend $1,100. But at the same time, I wouldn't buy a 2-year-old GPU just to have 12 gigs of VRAM. But that's me. Not to mention that any newer RTX 4060 laptop is also going to be paired with a newer CPU. And also, most modern gaming laptops these days have newer features like a mux switch and advanced Optimus, which is something that this laptop does not have. So even with this laptop and its 6800M, you're kind of leaving performance on the table unless you connect a monitor to the Type-C port on the back, as that connects directly to the 6800M. If your goal is 1080p or 1440p gaming, and you really want the safety of the extra VRAM, but at the expense of less GPU performance, no DLSS, and no frame generation, then yeah, consider the 6800M. If you need more details on VRAM, then check out this video next, where I discuss VRAM with Steve from Hardware Unboxed and how much is enough. So I'll see you in that one next.